The letter trembled in my hands as I stared at the address of my childhood home. 3 years had passed since I'd last set foot in that house, since the day I woke up in the hospital with a foggy memory and a body full of unexplained bruises. My name is Alexandra, and I was 21 when my stepmother tried to erase me from my family's life. Are you sure you want to open that? Oliver leaned against my office desk, his usual confident demeanor softened with concern. You've come so far, Alex. Don't let them drag you back. I broke the seal and pulled out the document, my heart pounding against my ribs. It's from Dad's lawyer. My voice cracked. The house, the one Mom left me in her will. They never managed to transfer it to Rebecca's name. The memories rushed back like a flood. That night, Rebecca had served her special tea, the one that made everything hazy. I remembered stumbling, the world spinning, her voice syrupy sweet as she guided me toward the stairs. Careful, dear, you seem unwell. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital. They called it an accident, a terrible fall down the stairs. But I knew better. The look in Rebecca's eyes when she visited, cold, calculating, disappointed, told me everything I needed to know. Your father called again, Oliver said, pulling me back to the present. That's the third time this week. I set down the letter and pulled up our company's latest projections. Did he mention Rebecca? He said she's worried about you. Oliver snorted. Funny how she only started worrying after your startup hit the news. Our tech company had just secured its second round of funding, $20 million. The headlines called me a prodigy, a rising star in artificial intelligence. Success was the sweetest revenge. My phone buzzed, a text from my half-sister Raylyn. Alex, please call me. Mom's acting weird again. Dad won't listen. Shit, I grabbed my jacket. I need to see Ray. Oliver blocked the door. Wait, there's something else you should see first. He handed me a newspaper clipping. Your father's company is in trouble. Major trouble. The article detailed mounting debts and missed payments. My father's signature was on everything, but I recognized Rebecca's handiwork. She'd always been ambitious, always pushing for expansion, for more. I dialed Raylyn's number, my hands shaking. She answered on the first ring. Alex? Her voice was barely a whisper. She's trying to sell the house, your house, the one Mom left you. She can't sell what isn't hers, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You don't understand. She's desperate. Dad's about to lose everything, and she's convinced him you're the only one who can help. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. By signing away my inheritance? Please come home, Raylyn pleaded. Not for them, for me. Oliver watched me, concern etched on his face. He'd been there through everything, the recovery, the nightmares, building our company from nothing. He knew what going back could cost me. I'll think about it, I told Ray, ending the call. You're going back, aren't you? Oliver sighed. I picked up the inheritance letter again, running my fingers over the embossed letterhead. Mom knew Oliver. She must have known what Rebecca was capable of. Why else would she leave the house in my name, with a clause that it can never be sold without my signature? My phone buzzed again, an email from the family lawyer, Kimberly. The subject line made my blood run cold. Urgent, foreclosure notice. I opened it with trembling fingers. The attachment showed what I'd suspected. Rebecca had been taking out loans against the house, my house. But without my signature, they were worthless. Look at this, I said, showing Oliver the screen. She forged my signature on some of these documents. Oliver whistled low. That's prison time. I stared out the window at the Seattle skyline, at the empire I'd built from the ashes of my old life. 3 years ago, she thought she'd won. She thought she'd broken me. What are you going to do? I grabbed my keys, my mind made up. I'm going home, but this time I'm not the scared little girl she remembers. This time, I have proof. The inheritance letter felt heavy in my bag as I headed for the elevator. My mother's last gift wasn't just a house. It was protection, insurance against the woman who tried to destroy me. And now, that same house would be Rebecca's undoing. As the elevator doors closed, I smiled. Sometimes karma needs a little help. The familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood felt smaller now, shadows of what they once were. I pulled my Tesla into the driveway of my mother's, my house, the gravel crunching under the tires. Nice place, Oliver said from the passenger seat. Hard to believe they're about to lose it. I killed the engine but couldn't bring myself to get out. 3 years ago, I left here in an ambulance. A figure appeared at the front door, Raylan, her dark hair wild around her face. She ran down the steps and yanked open my car door. You actually came. She pulled me into a fierce hug, then stepped back to look at me. God, you look so successful. You look tired, I said, noting the dark circles under her eyes. Yeah, well, living with Rebecca will do that to you. She glanced at Oliver. Who's this? Oliver Turner, business partner and designated voice of reason, he said, extending his hand, though Alex rarely listens to reason. A curtain twitched in the upstairs window. Rebecca was watching. They're not home, Raylan said, following my gaze. Dad's at the bank, and Rebecca's at her lawyer's office. Again. We went inside, and I was struck by how little had changed. Same furniture, same photos on the walls. Except now I'd been cropped out of most of them. Want to see what they did to your room? Raylan asked, already heading up the stairs. My old bedroom had been converted into a home office. Rebecca's designer handbags displayed like trophies on floating shelves. My chest tightened. She sells them online now, Raylan explained. Since Dad's company started struggling, she's been trying everything to bring in money. Oliver whistled, picking up one of the bags. This is fake. A good fake, but definitely counterfeit. I raised an eyebrow. How do you know? My sister works in luxury retail. These stitches are all wrong. He set the bag down carefully. Your stepmother's running a counterfeit operation from your bedroom. A car door slammed outside. Raylan rushed to the window. Shit, they're back early. Alexandra? Rebecca's voice floated up the stairs, honey-sweet and dangerous. Is that your car in the driveway? I squared my shoulders and headed downstairs, Oliver close behind me. Rebecca stood in the foyer, elegant as ever in her designer suit. My father hovered behind her, looking older and grayer than I remembered. What a lovely surprise, Rebecca said, air-kissing my cheek. And who's this handsome young man? Oliver Turner, he said coolly, Alex's business partner. Ah, yes, the little tech company. Rebecca's smile didn't reach her eyes. How quaint. $20 million in second-round funding is a bit more than quaint, Oliver replied. My father stepped forward. Princess, we've been trying to reach you. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't call me that. Not after 3 years of silence. We need to discuss the house, Rebecca cut in. Perhaps over dinner? Just family? Oliver stays, I said firmly. And I've seen the foreclosure notice. There's nothing to discuss. Rebecca's facade cracked slightly. You don't understand the situation. I understand perfectly. You've been taking out loans against property you don't own, using forged documents. I pulled out my phone, showing her the email from Kimberly. That's fraud. My father's face went pale. Rebecca, what is she talking about? Mateo, darling, I can explain. Did you know, Dad? I asked, my voice sharp. Did you know she tried to have me written out of Mom's will? That she forged my signature? That the night I fell down the stairs, That's enough. Rebecca's mask slipped completely. You ungrateful little... Mom, stop. Raylan appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Tell them about the bags. Tell them what you've really been doing with Dad's money." The front door opened again, and Collins Walker from the bank stepped in, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Edwards, I have those documents you requested." "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had company." I turned to Collins. "Perfect timing. I'm Alexandra, the actual owner of this house, and I think we need to have a conversation about some irregularities in these loan applications." Rebecca's face went white. My father looked between us, confusion giving way to understanding, then horror. "Princess?" "Alexandra," he corrected himself. "What happened that night? The night you fell?" I met Rebecca's eyes, saw the fear there. "Why don't you ask your wife about the tea she served me? The one she said would help me sleep." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, and rain began to fall. A storm was coming, in more ways than one. Oliver touched my arm. "Alex, maybe we should continue this conversation somewhere more official, with lawyers present." I nodded, not breaking eye contact with Rebecca. "I think that's an excellent idea." The law office felt sterile and cold, much like Rebecca's smile as she sat across the conference table. My father had insisted on a family meeting with the lawyers present, though his hands hadn't stopped shaking since yesterday's revelations. "Let's address the elephant in the room," Kimberly said, spreading documents across the table. "These loan applications contain forged signatures." Rebecca leaned forward. "There must be some mistake." "Save it," I cut her off. "I had a forensic document examiner review everything this morning." I slid a report across the table. "Would you like to explain why you've been signing my name since I was in the hospital?" My father put his head in his hands. "I don't understand. Rebecca, you told me Alexandra had agreed to help with the business loans." "Of course she did," Rebecca said smoothly. "Darling, remember? We discussed it over dinner that night." "The night you drugged me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. "That dinner?" The door opened and Raylan slipped in, followed by Oliver. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "This is a private family matter," she snapped. "Then I definitely belong here," Raylan said, dropping a designer handbag on the table. "Let's talk about your side business, Mom, the counterfeit luxury goods you've been selling online." Kimberly sat up straighter. "Mrs. Edwards, is this true?" "Don't answer that," Rebecca's lawyer interrupted. "We're here to discuss the house, nothing more." "It's all connected," Oliver said, pulling out his tablet. "We've traced the money. The loans taken out against Alexandra's house were used to finance the counterfeit operation. Classic money laundering." My father looked like he might be sick. "The business expansion? The new suppliers you found?" "Were all fake," I finished. "She's been bleeding your company dry to fund her schemes." Rebecca's composure cracked. "Everything I did for this family. Your precious mother left us nothing but debt, and that house—" "My mother left the house to me," I said, standing up, "because she knew exactly what kind of person you are." "You have no proof of any wrongdoing regarding Alexandra's accident," Rebecca's lawyer interjected. Raylan reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. "Actually, we do. I found Mom's old diary. She wrote everything down, including the sleeping pills she crushed into Alex's tea." Rebecca lunged for the notebook, but Oliver was faster. He handed it directly to Kimberly, who began flipping through the pages. "This is—" Kimberly looked up, her professional demeanor slipping. "Mrs. Edwards, these entries detail premeditated attempted murder." The room went silent. My father stood up so quickly, his chair toppled backward. "You tried to kill my daughter?" His voice was barely a whisper. Rebecca's face contorted. "She was ruining everything, always bringing up her mother, turning you against me. The house was supposed to be mine." "The police are on their way," Oliver said quietly, his phone in hand. They're very interested in both the fraud and the attempted murder confession we just recorded. I walked around the table to stand in front of Rebecca. You know what the worst part is? I would have helped if you'd just asked, but you couldn't stand the idea of needing anything from me. Alex, my father reached for me, but I stepped back. You're not much better, I told him. You saw what was happening and chose to look away. Every time. Raylan moved to my side, slipping her hand into mine. What happens now? The door opened again, and 2 police officers entered, followed by Collins from the bank. Rebecca Edwards, one officer said, we need you to come with us. As they led Rebecca away in handcuffs, she turned to my father one last time. Mateo, please, tell them I did it for us. But my father wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the diary in Kimberly's hands, at the evidence of how thoroughly he'd failed to protect his daughter. The house, Collins spoke up awkwardly. Given the circumstances, the bank is willing to work out new payment arrangements with the legitimate owner. I looked at my father, saw the defeat in his shoulders, the fear in his eyes. 3 years ago, I'd wanted nothing more than to hurt them the way they'd hurt me. Now, watching my father's world crumble, I felt nothing but exhaustion. Draw up the paperwork, I told Collins. We'll need to review all the legitimate loans versus the fraudulent ones. Alexandra, my father started. I'm not doing this for you, I said. I'm doing it for Raylan and for Mom. She loved this house. Oliver touched my shoulder. We should go. The police will need statements. As we left the office, Raylan squeezed my hand. Thank you, she whispered, for not letting her win. I looked back at my father, still standing alone in the conference room, and realized that in the end, there were no winners here, only survivors. The house felt different with Rebecca gone. I stood in her former office, my old bedroom, boxing up the counterfeit bags for the police evidence locker. Each one represented another lie, another betrayal. Found something, Raylan called from the closet. She emerged holding a dusty wooden box. It has Mom's name on it. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were stacks of letters, photos, and a small velvet pouch. Oh my God, I whispered, pulling out a photograph. This was Mom's last Christmas. The doorbell rang, startling us both. Oliver's voice drifted up from downstairs. Alex, your father's here. I shoved the box under my arm. Not now. I can't. Please. My father's voice cracked. 5 minutes. Raylan touched my shoulder. I'll take the box to your car. You should talk to him. I descended the stairs slowly. My father stood in the foyer, looking lost without Rebecca's commanding presence beside him. Oliver hovered nearby, ready to intervene if needed. The police called, my father said. Rebecca's being held without bail. The fraud charges alone. He trailed off, running a hand through his gray hair. I had no idea about the sleeping pills. You have to believe me. But you knew something was wrong that night, I said. You knew, and you chose to believe her anyway. I was a coward. He pulled something from his pocket, an old envelope. I found this in Rebecca's things. It's from your mother, dated a week before she died. My hands shook as I opened it. Mom's familiar handwriting filled the page. Mateo, if you're reading this, I need you to protect our Alexandra. Rebecca isn't who you think she is. The money missing from the accounts? I looked up. What money? Your mother suspected Rebecca was embezzling from the company even then. He slumped against the wall. I didn't want to see it. After your mother died, Rebecca seemed so capable, so sure of everything. It was easier to let her take control. Even when she tried to kill your daughter? Oliver asked sharply. Oliver, I warned, but he stepped forward. No, he needs to hear this. You almost died. You spent months recovering, building yourself back up, while he let that woman erase you from your own family. You're right, my father said quietly. I failed you, princess, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. The front door opened and Raylan rushed in, clutching her phone. Alex, you need to see this. Mom's been posting on social media from jail. I grabbed the phone. Rebecca's post was already going viral. My stepdaughter's vicious lies have torn our family apart. The truth about her mother's death will come out. Some accidents aren't accidents at all. My blood ran cold. She's implying that Mom's death wasn't natural, Raylan finished. She's trying to deflect from her crimes by accusing Mom of something. That's impossible, my father protested. Your mother died of heart failure. There was an autopsy. Oliver was already on his phone. I'm calling Kimberly. We need to get ahead of this. I walked to the living room, staring at the family photos Rebecca hadn't managed to alter. Mom's smile, always so bright, even near the end. The missing money, I said slowly. Dad, where did it go? He shook his head. We never found out. Rebecca claimed she'd invested it in overseas opportunities, but the paperwork was vague. Alex, Oliver called from the foyer. Kimberly says Rebecca's lawyer is pushing for a deal. They want to trade information about your mother's death for a reduced sentence. She's bluffing, I said, but doubt crept in. She has to be. Raylan was scrolling through her phone. There's more. Mom had a private Instagram account I didn't know about. Look at these photos from right before your accident. The images showed Rebecca at various banks, meeting with people in expensive suits. In one photo, a familiar face stood out. That's Dr. Phillips, my father said. Your mother's cardiologist. A piece clicked into place. The same doctor who prescribed Mom's heart medication. Oliver was already dialing. I'm calling my contact at the FBI. This just became much bigger than fraud. I sank onto the couch, the weight of this new revelation pressing down on me. She didn't just try to kill me. She might have. We'll find the truth, my father said firmly. Whatever it takes. Raylan sat beside me, gripping my hand. Mom kept records of everything. If there's proof, it'll be in that box we found. I stood up, determination replacing shock. Oliver, tell the FBI we'll cooperate fully. Dad, I need every financial record from the company dating back to when Rebecca first arrived. Ray, help me go through Mom's box. And Rebecca's social media threats? Oliver asked. I looked at the family photo again, at my mother's smile. Let her talk. She doesn't know what we just found. The truth about my mother's death had been hidden in this house all along, waiting to be discovered. Rebecca thought she could use it as leverage, but she just made her biggest mistake yet. The FBI office buzzed with activity as Agent Sarah Martinez spread the contents of Mom's box across the conference table. Each piece of evidence told part of a story I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. Your mother was thorough, Martinez said, examining a stack of bank statements. She documented every suspicious transaction, every meeting between Rebecca and Dr. Phillips. Oliver pointed to a series of offshore transfers. Look at these dates. Each withdrawal corresponds with a change in your mother's medication dosage. She was tracking Rebecca all along, I said, picking up a photo of Rebecca leaving Dr. Phillips's office. She knew something was wrong. The door opened and Kimberly rushed in, clutching her laptop. Rebecca's lawyer just sent over their proposed deal. You need to see this. She placed the laptop in front of me. Rebecca's statement was short but devastating. I will provide evidence that Alexandra's mother was embezzling company funds and orchestrated her own death for the insurance payout. In exchange, I want full immunity. That's ridiculous, my father exploded from his corner of the room. Maria would never— Wait, Martinez interrupted, pulling out a document from Mom's box. This might explain Rebecca's strategy. Your mother took out a substantial life insurance policy 3 months before her death. My hands clenched into fists. Because Rebecca threatened her, Look at the dates. This was right after Mom confronted her about the missing money. Raylan, who'd been quietly examining Mom's diary, suddenly sat up straight. Here, Mom wrote about it. Rebecca found the evidence. Says she'll destroy everything we built unless I take the fall. The policy is my only protection for Alexandra now. Martinez leaned forward. This changes everything. Your mother wasn't just tracking Rebecca's crimes. She was building a case. But why didn't she go to the police? Oliver asked. Because of me, my father said quietly. She was protecting me. I was blind to Rebecca's manipulation, and Maria knew it would destroy me to learn the truth. A knock at the door announced Collins from the bank. Sorry to interrupt, but we found something in the loan records. Dr. Phillips's signature appears on several documents as a guarantor. He was in on it from the beginning, I realized. Rebecca needed a doctor she could control to manipulate Mom's medication. Martinez pulled out her phone. I'll get a warrant for Phillips's records right now if he altered your mother's prescriptions. That's murder, Kimberly finished, and conspiracy to commit murder in Alexandra's case. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A video link. My hands shook as I opened it. Rebecca's face filled the screen, her prison jumpsuit a stark contrast to her usual polished appearance. Hello, Alexandra. By now you've found your mother's little collection of evidence. Impressive, isn't it? But incomplete. The real story died with her. Unless you accept my deal, you have 1 hour to drop all charges, or I release everything I have about your mother to the press. She's bluffing, Oliver said, but I shook my head. No, she's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. Martinez was already moving. We can trace that number. Don't bother, I said, standing up. I want to talk to her, face to face. Alex, no, Oliver protested. That's exactly what she wants. She wants to play games, I corrected him, but I have something she doesn't know about. I pulled one last item from Mom's box, a small USB drive labeled Insurance. What's on it? Raylan asked. I don't know yet, but Mom labeled it the day before she died. I handed it to Martinez. Can your team decrypt this? 20 minutes later, the room was silent as we watched the video on the drive. Mom's face, thin but determined, filled the screen. If you're watching this, I'm dead, and Rebecca has finally shown her true colors. Everything you need is here. The real bank records, the recordings of her meetings with Phillips, all of it. I'm sorry, Alexandra. I thought I could protect you by playing her game. I was wrong. Martinez paused the video. This is a dying declaration, completely admissible in court. My phone buzzed again. Rebecca's ultimatum counting down. 50 minutes left. I'm still gonna talk to her, I said, holding up my hand to stop the protests. But not as a victim, not as the scared girl she tried to erase. She wants to tell stories about my mother? Fine. Let's see how she handles the truth. I'm coming with you, my father said, standing. It's time I faced what I helped create. Raylan hugged me. Make her pay. For Mom. Martinez nodded to her team. We'll have everything ready. The moment she confesses. Oh, she'll confess, I said, picking up my mother's diary. She thinks she's winning. She thinks this is her chance to rewrite history. Oliver grabbed his coat. I'll drive. Someone needs to keep you from committing justifiable homicide. As we headed out, I touched the diary in my bag. Mom had died protecting her family from Rebecca. Now it was my turn to protect her legacy. Rebecca wanted to tell stories? I had a feeling she wouldn't like the ending to this one. The prison visiting room felt smaller than I expected. Rebecca sat across from me, her perfect posture unchanged by the orange jumpsuit. My father sat beside me, while Oliver waited just outside with Martinez. 30 minutes left, Rebecca said, tapping her fingers on the metal table. Tick-tock. Before you say anything else, I placed Mom's diary on the table. You should know we found everything. Her smile didn't waver. Did you? And what exactly do you think you found? Let's start with Dr. Phillips, I said, opening the diary. He's already talking to the FBI. Seems he doesn't want to go down for murder. The first crack appeared in her facade, a slight twitch of her eye. You really thought you could threaten me with Mom's reputation? I continued. She was 3 steps ahead of you the whole time. Your mother was an embezzler, Rebecca snapped. I have proof. You mean these? I slid copies of the bank statements across the table. The ones you doctored after forcing her to take out that life insurance policy? My father's hand gripped my arm. Rebecca, how could you? How could I? She leaned forward, mask slipping. How could you be so blind? Your precious Maria was going to ruin everything, digging into my past, threatening to expose. Your previous identity? I interrupted. The color drained from her face. Mom found that too. Rebecca isn't even your real name, is it? You're bluffing, she whispered. I pulled out my phone, playing the video from Mom's USB drive. Rebecca's eyes widened as she watched Mom detail every aspect of her investigation. The fake identity, the previous fraud charges, the connection to Dr. Phillips. Turn it off, she demanded. Why? This is my favorite part, where you threatened to kill me if Mom didn't take the fall for your embezzlement. I never. Save it, my father cut in. The FBI has the original recordings. Maria knew you'd try something like this. She hid cameras in her office. Rebecca's composure shattered. She deserved it, acting so superior, protecting her precious daughter while painting me as the villain. I built that company into what it is. You destroyed it, I corrected, just like you tried to destroy me. The only difference is I survived. You have no idea what I'm capable of, she hissed. Even in here, I have connections. One phone call. To who? I asked. Dr. Phillips? He's in custody. Your lawyer? She's cooperating to save herself. The people running your counterfeit operation? Arrested this morning. The door opened and Martinez stepped in. Time's up. Dr. Phillips just signed a full confession. We have enough to charge you with first-degree murder. Rebecca lunged across the table, her hands reaching for my throat, but guards were already moving. As they restrained her, she screamed, I should have pushed you harder down those stairs. There it is, Martinez said calmly. Confession recorded, along with the threat. My father stood, finally looking at his wife with clear eyes. I'll be filing for divorce. Don't contact us again. As Rebecca was dragged away, still screaming threats, I picked up Mom's diary. She never understood, did she? Mom wasn't collecting evidence just to expose her. What do you mean? My father asked. She was creating a safety net. Everything in this diary, the recordings, the USB, it was all to protect us after she was gone. She knew what Rebecca would do. Oliver appeared in the doorway. Raylan just called. Dr. Phillips gave up everything. Dates, times, exactly how they altered your mother's medication. They're charging him as an accomplice to murder. I touched the diary's worn cover. Mom wrote that she was sorry she couldn't stop Rebecca directly. She was afraid Rebecca would hurt me if she did. Maria always put you first, my father said softly. I forgot that somewhere along the way. Martinez approached with forms in hand. We'll need official statements, but this case is solid. Rebecca's looking at life without parole. As we left the prison, I saw Rebecca being led to a secure transport vehicle. Our eyes met briefly. All her power, all her manipulation, stripped away in an instant. She'd thought she was so clever, using Mom's death as leverage. Instead, Mom had reached out from the past and exposed every dark secret Rebecca had tried to bury. You okay? Oliver asked as we reached the car. No, I admitted, but I will be. We all will be. My phone buzzed. Raylan again. They're seizing all of Mom's assets. The house is officially safe. I looked back at the prison one last time. Rebecca had tried to write her own ending, but Mom had left us the true story. Now it was up to us to write the next chapter. Let's go home, I said. We have a lot of healing to do. The sun was setting as we drove away, casting long shadows behind us. Some ghosts, I realized, don't need to be fought. They just need to be brought into the light. 1 month after Rebecca's confession, I stood in the master bedroom of my mother's house, sorting through the last of her belongings. The trial was set to begin next week, but today was about something more important. Found it, Raylan called from the closet. She emerged holding a white garment bag. Mom's wedding dress. She always said you should have it. A knock at the door interrupted my response. Oliver poked his head in. Your father's here, and you might want to come downstairs. There's something you need to see. We descended to find my father standing in the living room with Kimberly and Collins. A large box sat on the coffee table. What's going on? I asked. The FBI finished processing Rebecca's storage unit, Kimberly explained. They found this. It's addressed to you, from your mother. My hands trembled as I opened the box. Inside was a leather-bound journal and an envelope marked, "For Alexandra, when you're ready." Rebecca hid this? Raylan asked, anger coloring her voice. She hid a lot of things, my father said quietly. The FBI found evidence of her crimes going back 20 years. Different names, different victims. I opened the envelope, unfolding a letter written in Mom's familiar hand. My dearest Alexandra, if you're reading this, then my worst fears about Rebecca have come true. I'm writing this the night before I confront her about the missing money. I know the risk, but I can't let her destroy everything we've built. The journal contains everything: my investigation, my fears, and most importantly, my hopes for you. I've arranged for the house to be yours because I know Rebecca will try to take everything else. The house isn't just walls and memories. It's your foundation, your strength. Don't let hatred consume you. Rebecca's greatest weapon was always bitterness. Don't let her win by becoming like her. All my love, Mom. There's more, Collins said, pulling out some documents. We found the original company records. Your mother had set up a separate trust in your name. Rebecca never found it. Oliver whistled at the numbers. This could save your father's company. Our company, my father corrected. It was always meant to be yours too, Princess. I just lost sight of that. Raylan squeezed my hand. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, Martinez arrived with more news. Dr. Phillips took a plea deal. He's testifying against Rebecca. With his testimony and your mother's evidence, it's over. Not quite, I said, picking up Mom's journal. There's one more thing we need to do. The next morning, I sat in the courthouse, watching as Rebecca was led in for her pre-trial hearing. She looked smaller somehow, her designer confidence replaced by desperate fear. The state calls Alexandra Bennett, the prosecutor announced. As I took the stand, Rebecca wouldn't meet my eyes. I opened Mom's journal and began to read. I'm not here for revenge, I started. I'm here because my mother believed in justice, not vengeance. This journal tells the story of a woman who faced evil with courage, who protected her family with love instead of hate. Rebecca finally looked up, her expression unreadable. You tried to erase both of us, I continued. But Mom left us something you could never understand, the truth. Not just about your crimes, but about the power of family, real family. The prosecutor presented Mom's evidence piece by piece. With each revelation, Rebecca seemed to shrink further into herself. When Dr. Phillips testified about altering Mom's medication, my father had to leave the room. Finally, the judge spoke. Given the overwhelming evidence and the severity of the crimes, I'm denying bail. The defendant will remain in custody until trial. As they led Rebecca away, she turned to me one last time. I never meant, save it. I cut her off. Mom knew exactly who you were. That's why she made sure you'd never win. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements, but Oliver guided me through them to where Raylan and my father waited. Ready to go home? Raylan asked. I looked at Mom's journal in my hands. Actually, I think it's time for something new. Dad, what do you say we rebuild the company? The way Mom always wanted, together. He hugged me for the first time in years. She'd be so proud of you, Princess. Of all of us, I corrected, including Raylan in the embrace. Oliver cleared his throat. Not to interrupt the family moment, but we have that tech merger meeting in an hour. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Then let's go build something good, something Mom would be proud of. As we left the courthouse, I realized Mom had given us one final gift, the chance to write our own story, free from Rebecca's shadow, and this time we'd write it together. The autumn breeze rustled through the garden as I unlocked the front door of my childhood home. The renovation crew had just finished, transforming Rebecca's cold designer showcase back into the warm space Mom had created. Last box, Oliver announced, carrying in a crate of family photos. Though I still think you should sell this place and buy that penthouse downtown. Not happening. I began unpacking the photos, restored to their rightful places. This house was Mom's gift. It's where we belong. The doorbell rang. Raylan burst in, waving a newspaper. We made the front page. Tech Sisters Transform Family Legacy. Bennett AI revolutionizes industry. Did you see the best part? My father followed her in, carrying coffee for everyone. The stock price doubled after the merger announcement. I picked up Mom's portrait, placing it above the fireplace. She would have loved seeing you run the AI division, Ray. You're even better with code than I am. Speaking of code, Oliver interrupted, checking his phone. The prison's firewall upgrade is complete. Rebecca won't be sending any more mysterious emails from behind bars. The trial had ended with Rebecca facing life imprisonment for Mom's murder and my attempted murder. Dr. Phillips got 20 years for his role. The truth had finally won. Mail's here, Raylan called from the front door, including something from Mom's old lawyer in Boston. I opened the thick envelope and a small key fell into my palm. The accompanying letter made my heart skip. Per Maria's instructions, this key opens a safety deposit box at First National to be delivered to Alexandra upon the successful conviction of Rebecca Edwards. Dad? I held up the key. Did you know about this? He shook his head, looking puzzled. Maria had accounts in Boston from before we married. She never closed them. An hour later, we gathered around the conference table at First National as the bank manager opened the safety deposit box. Inside lay another letter and a small USB drive. My dearest Alexandra, I read aloud, if you're reading this, you've done what I couldn't. You've exposed Rebecca's true nature and protected our family. But there's one last gift I need to share. I plugged the USB drive into Oliver's laptop. A video began playing. Mom, healthy and vibrant, sitting in her garden. Hello, my loves, she said, smiling. I'm recording this because I've discovered something wonderful. The AI project I was working on before Rebecca arrived, I completed it. The code is on this drive, along with patents already filed in Alexandra's name. My father gasped. The neural network project? But Rebecca said it failed. Because she wanted us to believe that, I realized. Mom knew she was going to try to steal it. The video continued. Alexandra, this technology could change everything, but more importantly, it proves what I've always known. Our family's strength isn't in buildings or bank accounts. It's in here. She touched her heart. Rebecca never understood that. She saw power as something to take. We know it's something to share. Raylan was already examining the code. This is incredible. The applications for medical diagnosis alone. That's why Mom hid it, I said softly. She knew Rebecca would use it for profit instead of helping people. There's more. Oliver pointed to the screen. Stock certificates, dated the week before she died. She transferred ownership of her original patents to both of you. He looked at Raylan and me. You two own controlling interest in everything. My father wiped his eyes. She made sure you'd always be stronger together. I hugged Raylan close. Partners? Always, she agreed. For Mom. Back at the house that evening, we gathered in the garden Mom had loved so much. The flowers she'd planted still bloomed, persistent and beautiful. To Maria, my father raised his glass, who gave us everything we needed to find our way back to each other. And to new beginnings, Oliver added, squeezing my hand. I looked around at my real family, not the perfect image Rebecca had tried to force, but something stronger, something true. Mom wrote that Rebecca's greatest weakness was thinking power meant control, I said, but real power is in letting go, in trusting love to be stronger than hate. Raylan lifted her glass. To Mom's last gift, showing us that the best revenge isn't punishment. It's living well, I finished. As the sun set, I felt Mom's presence in every flower, every breath of evening air. She'd given us the tools to rebuild, not just the company, but our family. And in the end, that was worth more than any revenge could ever be. The house stood strong behind us, no longer a symbol of loss, but a foundation for something new, something Rebecca could never touch, something Mom had known we'd find all along, our way home.
Things have changed since Lily was born. I used to see Mark's face light up when I walked into a room. Now, I'm lucky if I get a grunt before he buries his nose back into his phone. His job's the same, maybe even less stressful than before, but something in him switched off the day we brought her home. Another painting, Grace? What's that, the third this week? Mark's voice would grip the air, sharp and sneering whenever he watched me set up my easel. He used to admire my work, even had my best piece framed in his office once. Not anymore. Yeah, so? It's not like I'm spending your money, I'd answer, trying not to let him see the tremble in my hands, keeping my focus on mixing the blues and yellows on my palette. But inside, each word he volleyed felt like a punch. Could have fooled me. And look at this place. Looks like a damn tornado hit it. He'd scan the room, his eyes scanning every toy and blanket out of place, holding them up like evidence of my failures. Look, I'm with Lily all day, and she's a handful, I'd fight back, my voice not as steady as I'd liked. And maybe if you helped a little around here. Help? With what? You're home all the time, you deal with it. That was our deal, remember? I make the cash, you handle the rest. Not my fault you can't manage. He'd cut me off, leaving no room for argument. Every night ended the same, with him turning away and dismissing me with a scoff. When he left for work, Lily would tug at the hem of my shirt, her little eyes confused. "Daddy mad?" she would ask, her tiny lips quivering at the thought. "No, baby, Daddy just has a lot on his mind. Here, help Mommy choose the colors, yeah?" I'd pull her into my arms, trying to smile for her sake, guiding her hand to pick out colors. Together, we'd paint, and for a while, the bitterness in Mark's tone would get drowned out by her laughter and our shared world of color. I knew my paintings were good, not because I was full of myself, but because they were the only thing I had left from a time when I felt confident, vibrant. That evening, when Mark came home, I did what I always did. I tried to greet him with a warm dinner, a clean house, and Lily squeaky from her bath and dressed in her best pajamas. "Hey," I said, the smell of roast chicken trailing behind me. "How was your day?" He grunted in reply, shrugging off his coat and throwing it over the couch. His eyes caught mine, then the easel set up in the corner of our living room. Still haven't gotten rid of that junk, huh? It's not junk, Mark. I'm working on something, I responded, the weariness seeping through. Looks like a waste of time. And money. You could be doing something productive, you know. He walked past me to the fridge, not waiting for an answer. Productive seemed to mean anything that made money or made his life easier. I wasn't doing either to his liking, I guessed. I am doing something, I said, my voice firmer now. I'm raising our daughter and keeping our home. And I'm trying to hang on to something that matters to me. My painting matters to me, Mark. He didn't even pause, just popped open a beer and drank deeply. Call it what you want, Grace. To me? Looks like you're just filling time, making a mess I'll have to pay someone to clean up. I felt the sting. Not from the unkindness of the words, I was getting used to that, but from the dismissal of my dreams, my passion. There wasn't a place for them in Mark's world anymore. Dinner's ready, I called out, in what felt like a weekly performance, standing with quivering hands as I served the meal. Mark's parents, seated like judges at the head of the table, barely noticed my effort to create a warm, hearty meal. Their eyes were fixed on the easel by the window. What's this then? Mark's dad, George, a broad man with a voice that filled the room, jabbed a finger towards my unfinished painting. Oh, that's just something Grace has been fooling around with, Mark chuckled, waving a dismissive hand before taking his seat. Real high-class stuff, right? Laughter rang out, and it twitched at my nerves, laughter that didn't reach their eyes. We're an artist now, are we? Chimed in Mark's mom, Patricia, her voice a kind of sharp that could slice steel. Why don't you show us your latest masterpiece, dear? George bellowed, his smile more of a challenge than a gesture of interest. I stood, rooted to the spot, feeling the flesh spread up my neck. It's not done yet, I muttered, but Mark was already striding over to the canvas, grabbing it with less care than he'd take with a dish towel. Look at this, folks, Mark laughed, flipping the canvas around like he was Vanna White revealing a letter on Wheel of Fortune. It's supposed to be a landscape, can you believe it? George's laughter bloomed loud again. Looks like a blind dog's nightmare. Patricia tooted, shaking her head, her nostrils flaring with each chortle. Why waste your time with this, hobby? Get a job or do something, anything, productive. As if any place would hire her, Mark snorted, setting the painting back with a thud that made my heart sink. The job market's tough out there, and well, look at her. I swallowed, hard. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I do plenty. I take care of Lily, and this house, and... My words faltered under their collective stare. Patricia poked at the food with her fork as if she suspected it was poisoned. Taking care of your family is the least you can do, she sniffed, but honestly, Mark, if you'd married someone with a little ambition. They went on, tearing strips off me with every word, while I just stood there. The room closed in, their words pressing on my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I felt myself slipping away, becoming smaller, insignificant in this grand performance of theirs. Something in me snapped. As soon as the meal ended, with a fake tremor in my voice, I excused myself, marched up the stairs, not looking back, and locked myself in the bedroom. Grace? Mark's voice climbed up the stairs, maybe half an hour later, cracking through the door. You coming back down? We need to clear the table. I didn't respond. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, a scream or a sob would have come out, and I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of hearing my break. I scrolled through my bank app, a frown etching deeper lines on my face. Our account was looking dire again this month, and the grocery list wasn't getting any shorter. Lily needed new shoes, too. She was sprouting like a weed. Mark's voice tumbled in from the living room. Grace, why is there a charge for $48.95 for Martin's art supplies? Just picked up a few things, I said, tapping through the app to transfer what remained of my personal savings to cover it. I needed them. Needed? Come on, Grace. That's money we could have put towards something important, isn't it? His voice was flat, bored even, with a hint of something else. Was it disappointment, frustration? I sighed. Art is important to me, Mark. The same way your golf is important to you. I didn't mention the fact that his golf clubs cost more than a year's worth of my supplies. Yeah, but golf is networking, it's part of my job. What does your painting get us? A cluttered house and wasted cash, he said, grumbling. It gets me through the day, I murmured, feeling that old, familiar tug-of-war in my chest. Mark snorted. Through the day? We have to be smart about money, not just spend it on whatever gets us through the day. Budget, Grace. Budget. That word felt like a choke chain. I pay for my art supplies with my own money, Mark. The money I had before. I trailed off, not wanting another fight. My before was a long-gone chapter, one that contained a job, independence, and a once-shared dream of my own gallery. Your money's our money, isn't it? He shot back, the insinuation that my financial independence was history, clear in his tone. And that your money is running out fast. What then? Later at the store, I chose the cheaper brands, counting every cent, every compromise. With the rest, I bought the smallest tubes of paint, the ones I could slip into the cart without raising eyebrows. Back home, I unpacked the bags with robotic precision, every item a testament to our tightrope walk above financial ruin. Putting back some luxuries, are we? Mark commented, his gaze landing on the no-name cereal and store-brand pasta. Yes, tightening the belt, I answered without looking at him, hiding the receipts, a paper trail of my crimes. He hummed, rummaging through the bags like an investigator looking for a slip-up. Where are the Greek yogurts you like? And isn't this the cheap coffee? I shrugged, busying myself with placing a can of tomatoes in the pantry. Prices went up. Had to make some cuts. Don't see any cuts in your art budget, though, he said, a cold finger pointing out the new brushes I'd slipped under a loaf of bread. I turned to him, meeting his eyes for the first time since the conversation began. This keeps me sane, Mark. My art keeps me sane. My voice was firm, and I clenched my fist around the countertop to stop the shake in my hand. Well, sanity's quite the luxury item these days, eh? He nodded towards the brushes, his words deliberate, biting. That night, I painted not out of passion, but frustration. Each stroke was a challenge, a cut from our personal budget to fit it within the constraints of Mark's expectations. But as I worked, I remembered a time when these brushes were a joy to hold, not a weapon I had to defend. Mark was somewhere across the country, tangled up in business trip meetings when he decided to drop the latest task on me. His voice buzzed through my phone, sounding like he was already out the door before he even finished his sentence. Grace, you gotta pull together a birthday present for my boss's wife, Clara. Her big day's in a week. Okay, do you have any cash set aside for that? I asked, squinting at our already tight budget on my laptop screen. Nah, you figure it out. Just make it look like we put some thought into it, he muttered, sounding distracted. Hang on, you want something nice, but I'm supposed to magic up the funds for it? I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. You always find a way. Make it happen, Grace. And with that cheery little line, he was gone. I let out a long, slow breath, closing my eyes and trying to push back the frustration gnawing at my last nerve. Didn't have the cash, but I needed something that would knock Clara's socks off. No pressure, right? After a deep dive into Clara's online world, it was clear she had a thing for art. Her feed was full of gallery visits, pictures of canvases that probably cost more than our car. She even had photos with artists, talked about supporting the arts, patronage and all that jazz. An idea sparked, and I grabbed it before it could blaze out of my mind. A painting, from me. I had the paints. I had the canvas. I sure as hell had the motive. I'd give Clara something no one else could, not off some high street. I spun the idea in my mind, letting it settle. I could picture the brush strokes already, feel the drag of bristles against canvas. It would be personal, and it'd be free. Bonus. A painting, then. Decision made. I was going to need every minute of every day if it was going to look anything like the kind of stuff Clara posted. I pulled out my old easel, set it up in the living room, and got to work. All the while, fingers crossed that my little slice of creativity would cut it in the high-stakes world of business birthday gifts. Day 1 postmarks bombshell. I'm standing in the middle of my makeshift studio, a corner of the dining room I've cleared out, pushing the table against the wall. The morning light streaming in, kinda highlighting the chaos of my art supplies spread all over. "Mommy, what's all this?" Lily, my 6-year-old, parks herself right in the middle of the chaos, her eyes as round as the splattered paint drops on the floor. "Mommy's gotta make a birthday present, baby." I reply, rifling through old brushes with bristles stiffer than my back feels. "For who?" She picks up a brush, examining the crusty edges like a pro. "For a lady Daddy works with," I explain, snatching the brush from her before it becomes a makeshift sword or fairy wand. Lily's forehead scrunches up in confusion. "But why can't Daddy buy something?" "Lily, go watch your cartoons, will ya? I need to think." I'm not in the mood to unpack the complexities of our bank account, or my marriage, to a kindergartner. Grumbling something under her breath, sounding too much like me for comfort, she trots off to the living room, leaving me to my quandary. The week grinds by. I'm pulling double shifts, daytime mommy, nighttime Picasso. The canvas starts to fill, taking on a life of its own. Something abstract, something that feels kind of like the whirlwind that's my life lately. I don't hear a peep from Mark. No check-in calls, not even a text asking how it's going. Guess he's too wrapped up in his charts and deals, and whatever he does that's too important to ring his wife. Lily, on the other hand, is my tiny shadow, always creeping back to watch me paint. "You're really good, Mommy," she says on what, day 4? "You should draw stuff more." I smile because that's probably the best review I'll ever get. "Think so, huh? Maybe I will." The night before the big reveal, the painting's finally staring back at me, done. It's not just art, it's everything I haven't been able to say or do, all poured out onto canvas. I can't sleep that night, tossing and turning, thoughts swirling in my head. What if Clara hates it? What if Mark thinks I've wasted my time? What if? But the morning comes, clear and bright. The painting's wrapped up, no fancy paper, just brown parcel stuff, but neat. A nice bow from Lily's hair ribbons, because why not? So, there I was, at the boss's wife's birthday bash, my arms wrapped tight around a package, the painting I hoped would be a hit. I slid through the crowd, eyes low, wishing I could blend into the wallpaper. Mark was there too, just flown in hot from his latest trip, looking every inch the man who had it all, except the picture-perfect trophy wife. His eyes swept over the women, polished and perfect in their cocktail dresses, then landed on me like a ton of bricks. I saw that look on his face, like he just bit into a lemon. He looked me up and down and shook his head just enough so only I'd notice. The room faded a bit, like someone turned down the volume on the party, and all I could hear was my heartbeat in my ears. Then his gaze zeroed in on the parcel, all wrapped up and nestled in my shaky grip. His eyes flashed, and oh boy, I knew that look. I saw the storm brewing before the first word even shot out. "What's that?" he spat, barely keeping a lid on it. I pulled the package closer, as if I could shield it, and me, from what was coming. "It's a gift. My painting." The words barely had a chance to hang in the air before his voice boomed. "A painting? You're kidding, right?" It was loud, loud enough to catch a few glances our way. I tried to shush him with my eyes, but he was past caring. "You actually think this is okay? To hand her a piece of amateur hour?" The whispers around us started like the start of a rain, soft but getting stronger. "Mark, please, not here," I begged, my cheeks flaming up something fierce. "Did you lose your mind?" he roared, and the room didn't just pause, it froze. "You make us look like fools." By now, we were the main event. Eyes flicked to us, then away, then back again like they were watching tennis. I shrank, wished I could melt right into the floorboards. His face was a shade of red I'd only ever seen on traffic lights. Great, just great, Grace, he vented, throwing his hands up. You don't think, do ya? The heat in my face told me I was blushing, and not in a cute way. My hands shook, but I hugged the painting tighter, 'cause what else was there to hang on to? I took a breath, tried to remember why I thought this was a good idea. Now everyone's gonna have a go at us, thanks to you and your dumb idea, he added, sharp as a knife, for anyone still pretending they weren't listening. My mouth opened, words ready to tumble out, to defend or maybe just to tell him to put a sock in it. But what was there to say with the whole room's eyes burning holes into us? Instead, I just stood there, the fool he called me, wishing the ground would do me a favor and swallow me whole. The laughter after Mark's outburst felt like daggers. Even with the room spinning, I caught the boss's eye. He was just watching, all quiet, with something like confusion on his face. And his wife, Clara, she had this half-concerned, half-intrigued frown that actually gave me a sliver of hope. Clara waved a hand, cutting through the noise. Quiet down, everyone. Let's see what Grace has brought. I moved on autopilot, my hands still a bit jittery as they tore the paper from the canvas. The art kinda just spilled out into the room, all the colors and the shapes I'd spent nights pouring myself into. Clara's eyebrows shot up. Oh my, she said, and the room hushed like they were waiting for her to drop the hammer. But then she continued, this is quite something, Grace. Mark was still fuming by my side. Yeah, something all right. I ignored him and searched Clara's face for some sign. It's for you, I mumbled. Happy birthday? She tilted her head, studying the painting like it was a puzzle. It's bold. I like bold. Don't you, darling? She nudged her husband, pulling him into this. The boss was a tough guy to read, but he nodded. Don't see something like that every day. Mark tried to jump back in. Oh, come on, you're saying you like this mess? And there it was, the snap in Clara's voice as she turned to him with a squint. Mark, I'd watch it if I were you. Your wife has talent, and I won't have you embarrass her any further. It's unbecoming. The room fell into this tense, kind of quiet, the kind where you could hear someone sneeze 3 houses down. Look at the colors, the feeling in it, Clara was saying now. It's got life. Mark tried for a save. Well, sure, if you like that sort of thing. But Clara cut him off. I do. It's decided. This goes right in the foyer. I blinked. Was this actually happening? You sure, babe? The boss chimed in. It's not exactly. Clara shot him a look, and he trailed off. Standard. Right. It's unique. Her arm shot out to me, a beacon in the high heels and overpriced suit. See. Thank you, Grace. This here's a real gift, folks. It's got soul. And just like that, the murmurs started up again, but they had a different tune. People were nodding, some even looking at me with what felt like respect. Clara, still holding my painting like it was a treasure, turned her eyes on me again. So, Grace, she said, drawing the room's focus, ever thought about showing your work? Like in a gallery? Mark let out a scoff. I heard it, but my eyes were glued to Clara. Nah, who'd want to see my stuff? Don't worry, Grace. I would. And I know people. Clara's voice was firm, her eyes sharp. Mark tried to laugh it off. Come on, Clara, she's just dabbling. Clara quirked an eyebrow at him. So she dabbles better than some pros I know. What's it to you? I swallowed, feeling like I was teetering on the edge of something big. I don't know. I've never. What's to know? You jump in. I'll help. Right? Clara's look said she wasn't asking, she was telling. A giggle slipped from me. It was nervous, a bit wild-sounding even to my own ears. Sure. Right. Clara beamed. Good. It's settled then. After that, whispers flitted around like moths to a flame. People who barely gave me the time of day were now hanging on my arm, talking about my work. It felt surreal, like walking through someone else's life. Mark was suddenly there again, his hand on my back almost scalding. "You're not serious about this, are you?" There was that edge in his voice, like a knife threatening to cut. I turned to him, feeling the weight of the crowd, the pull of something new. "Yeah, I am." My voice was stronger than it had felt in years. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time that night. "But, what about us?" "What about us, Mark?" I repeated. "We've been over for a longer time than I want to admit." That shook him. He stepped back. "I thought we were fine." I turned to face him fully. "You thought wrong." The words were colder than I intended, but they needed to be said. Mark ran a hand through his hair, looking beaten. "So what, we just end it?" I looked down at the color splashed across the nails on my fingers, at the rings that didn't mean what they were supposed to anymore. "We ended it a long time ago. Now we're just making it official." He didn't have anything to say to that. I watched him walk away, his shoulders hunched. Clara's hand touched my shoulder. "You okay, hon?" I nodded. "I am. Thanks to you." She winked. "What are friends for, right? And you, Grace?" She paused, giving my shoulder a squeeze. "You're going to light up this town with your art. Just you wait." And with that, I felt my heart start to hammer for a whole new set of reasons. Ahead of me, there wasn't just an ending. There was a beginning, and it was painted in the boldest colors I could imagine. Lily and I? We'd be more than fine. We'd be us, unapologetically, unfalteringly us. My name is Alice. I'm currently parked on this faded sofa, trying to stitch together the mess that my so-called family life turned into. You know, before all this, I was living the typical 9-to-5 grind. I mean, marketing isn't exactly a thrill ride, but it was my thrill ride. Enter Jack. Dear old Jack. We were college sweethearts. That's what they call it, right? We did the whole dance, meeting at some random party, him spilling his drink and charming me with his red-faced apologies. Fast forward, love blooms, and marriage seemed like the right next step. He was some hotshot coding genius, had a nice gig as a software engineer. And things were sweet, smooth even. Then Charlie happened. Our little bundle of sleepless nights and toothless grins. So, I hung up my marketing hat and decided to go all in on this housewife gig. That meant I had more time to start picking up on the nuances of Jack's moods, especially when Linda, the Lord Almighty mother-in-law, rained down her opinions via Skype. Never met her in person, but damn, she sure did like to make her presence felt from a few hundred miles away. "You need to put your foot down, Jack." Linda's voice would slice through the speakers. "A man's home is his castle, and don't you forget it." I'd see how Jack's eyes shifted, shoulders squared like he was gearing up for war. After the call, he became a different guy. If I left a mug on the counter or dared to sit down before the clock hit acceptable by his newly acquired standards, boy, would I get it. "It's not a hotel, Alice. You see that? That's a dish out of place." His words felt like cold steel, not the Jack I knew. Jack would flip from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde and back before you could say schizophrenia. But it wouldn't stick. Once Linda's echo faded, I'd get my Jack back. On this particular Tuesday, Jack had that look in his eyes, that unnerving glint that always showed up post-Linda. He ambled into the kitchen, my domain, and leaned against the fridge with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. "Hey, babe, you need to pick up the pace around here," Mom said. I cut him off, hands deep in dough. "If Linda says jump, we asking how high now?" Not funny. She's right. We won't raise Charlie in a mess. I mean, look at this place. I followed his pointing finger around our perfectly tidy kitchen. The nerve of him. I thought about giving Jack a piece of my mind, but my mother always said to pick my battles, and with Jack on a Linda-fueled bender, it didn't feel like a winnable war. Suddenly, the sound of Linda's screechy tone popped from the living room. Another Skype alert. My stomach dropped. Come on, Alice. It's Mom. Watch the attitude. My eyes nearly rolled out of my skull. I wiped my hands and prepared to face the screen, our digital overlord. And there she was, in all her pixelated glory. Alice, dear, I see you're busy, but remember, Jack works hard. Keep that home nice for him, won't you? I gritted my teeth. Of course, Linda. Nothing but the best for your boy. Jack flashed me a warning look, like be nice or else. But as Linda carried on about her expectations, I swear I felt something in me start to crack. Would this ever end? Or was I destined to live under the thumb of a woman who wasn't even in the room? On a Thursday that felt like any other, with Charlie fussing in my arms and the smell of yesterday's dinner still haunting the living room, Jack came out with it. We're spending Christmas with my mom in her house, he said, not even looking up from his phone. I paused, Charlie's pacifier halfway to salvation. Christmas there? With Linda? The words were sour, just hanging in the air. Jack finally glanced up, eyebrow raised. Yep, good for the family and all that. High time they all met Charlie, don't you think? Pulling at the edge of my shirt, already spotted with who knows what, I frowned. But Charlie's so young, and I'm not up for a road trip, especially in December. He shrugged, scrolling through something undoubtedly important. Babe, it'll be fine. A bit of cold won't hurt him. Besides, Mom's already planning the whole thing. Heat flared up in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. Doesn't sound like a question, Jack. Did you even consider my say in this? Come on, Alice. It's not up for debate. This is what families do. They get together for the holidays. I shot him a look that could have burned toast. And usually, they ask, not announce, I snapped. He pocketed the phone and came over, trying to play peacemaker. Hey, I know it's sudden, but think about it. Could smooth things out with Mom. I laughed, but there was no joy in it. Smooth things out? You mean playhouse the Linda way or no way? Jack winced. That's not fair. You know how much she's been bugging me about visiting. I handed him Charlie, who seemed hellbent on testing his lungs. She's not the one who has to pack up an infant and deal with your family's drama. Jack bounced Charlie on his knee, a whisper of a smile on his face. It'll be like an adventure. You love adventures, remember? That's when the mom glare I'd been perfecting hit him full force. Adventures don't involve feeding schedules and diaper bags. But Jack had that determined look that spelled trouble. We're going, Alice. End of discussion. I let out a long sigh, nerves frayed. Fine, but hear this, Jack. We're not going there to be pushed around. I'm serious. He nodded, but there was a trace of something else there. And I won't remember saying yes to this kind of look. And you're gonna help, right? With the packing, the baby, and dealing with your mom? Yeah, of course, he said, though he was already picking up his phone again. With a defeated grunt, I moved to start making a list of what to take. Booties, blankets, and the battle gear needed to survive a week with Linda. The moment we stepped into Linda's house, a looming structure that seemed straight out of a ghost story with its creaky floorboards and chilly drafts, I knew we were in for a ride. A sea of faces turned our way, Jack's aunts and uncles, cousins by the dozen, and the venerable queen herself, Linda, holding court. Her eyes skimmed over me like a scanner, resting on our sleeping Charlie, wrapped snug in his blanket. There's my grandbaby, she exclaimed, her arms outstretched, with a warmth that almost felt real. But as she lifted her gaze to meet mine, the temperature could have dropped 10 degrees. Alice, she nodded, begrudging respect at best. Jack cleared his throat. Mom, thanks for having us. The room was buzzing with relatives chatting and the scent of cinnamon and pine. But the festive cheer didn't reach Linda's eyes when she turned back to me. Hope the drive wasn't too terrible. Roads can be unforgiving this time of year. It was all right, I returned with a tight smile, clutching Charlie a little closer. Well, let's not stand here catching a chill. Alice, Linda continued, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. I would really appreciate it if you could take the lead getting the place shipshape for Christmas. Jack shot me a desperate play nice look while I struggled to find words. Me? But, I've got Charlie too. Linda waved a hand dismissively. Oh, there will be plenty of hands eager to dote on the boy. Besides, I've seen your Instagram. You've got a knack for this sort of thing. My Instagram, the place where I posted meticulously filtered photos of our home that hid the chaos of reality? I gritted my teeth and forced another smile. I guess I can give it a go. A look of approval crossed Linda's face, one that didn't reach her eyes. So I dug into box after box of holiday decor, feeling more like Cinderella than a welcomed guest. Jack's family was a loud chorus of advice and backseat decorating, all while passing Charlie around like the season's hottest toy, a living, breathing doll for them to coo over. Jack vanished into the belly of the house, with only the odd shout of "How's it going there?" or "Mom says the garland should go higher," to remind me he was still there. By the time dinner rolled around, the grand old house glittered and shone like something out of a fairy tale where the fairy godmother had taken the day off and left Cinderella to do all the work herself. At the table, loaded with more food than the whole neighborhood could eat, Jack raised his glass in a toast. To family, he said, smiling. I caught a wink he sent his mother's way. I tried to match their cheer, but fatigue had long since taken the wheel. Jack noticed, but not with the sympathy I needed. You could have put a bit more tinsel up, he remarked offhandedly between bites. Mom noticed. After a long night chasing the elusive spirit of Christmas at the behest of Linda's pointed directions, all the while keeping a smile plastered on my face for the sake of holiday peace, I retired to our room. Next day I found Jack in what they called the den, but it was more like a wild man cave where Christmas seemed to have thrown up. There he was, sprawled on the couch, a beer in one hand, eyes glued to some game on TV. The sound of sports commentators filled the room. Jack, we need to talk. My voice was firm, louder than I intended. He glanced up, annoyed at being interrupted. What's up now? It's about yesterday, about everything since we got here. I'm tired, Jack. And I feel alone in all this. The words spilled out. He scoffed. Alone? With all my family around? Come on, Alice. You've got to toughen up. This is the big leagues. I'm not talking about numbers, Jack. Look, your mom, she's piling everything on me, and where are you? Off the grid the second any work pops up. He rolled his eyes. Not this again. Just do what she says, Alice. That's how it works around here. You'll live. Frustration boiled over. I'm not one of your mom's robots, Jack. I'm your wife, and I'm asking for your help. It's like you don't get it. He let out a laugh. Help? What do you want me to do? Decorate cookies? Hang tinsel? That's kid stuff. Just stick it out. His words stung. Kid stuff? Really? Because last I checked, we're a family too. Or is that kid stuff as well? Jack stood up, his face getting redder. Watch your tone, Alice. Don't start something. The room felt smaller, the walls closer. Start something? No, I'm finishing it, this conversation and your damn free ride. What's your deal, Jack? Too good to help out your own wife? He moved towards the door of the den. I've had enough of this. You knew what you were getting into when you married me. Remember that. I followed him. Yeah, I remember, promises. Support. Respect. Heard of them? But he was already out the door, leaving me talking to a room full of silent trophies and blinking lights. The next day, there wasn't much change. The family was all over the place, and I was still the designated workhorse. Jack avoided me, getting tight with his cousins, laughing too loud over beers and football. I worked, hardly speaking to anyone, especially not Jack. I was too angry, too worn out. And Charlie, bless him, seemed to sense the tension, becoming fussier with each passing hour. In the middle of a diaper change, Charlie crying and clutching at me, one of Jack's aunts walked in. She didn't knock, just barged in with a bucket of soiled linen. "Here you go. Add it to the laundry when you can." I looked at her, then at the laundry. "I can't right now. Can't you see?" She raised her eyebrows, surprisingly bold. "It's just laundry, dear. Plus, that's what you're here for, isn't it? To help out?" I straightened up, holding Charlie tight against my chest. "Just because I married Jack doesn't mean I'm the family maid." She frowned, her own patience wearing thin. "Don't be so sensitive. We all do our part here." "Yeah? When's Jack's turn?" Her face turned sour. "Jack? He's catching up with family." "Catching up?" My voice rose over Charlie's cries. "Is that what you call it?" She left without another word, but her message was clear: this was on me. I was on my own. I had to shove my way through the crowded store on Christmas Eve, grabbing whatever was left on the shelves. Didn't matter much what it was, anything could be turned into a Christmas dish with enough butter and salt, or so I figured. My phone was buzzing in my pocket the whole time, probably Jack or Linda wondering where I'd got to. But I was too frazzled to answer. Back at the house, I lugged the grocery bags through the snow, my arms about to fall off. Nobody came out to help, of course. I dumped the bags in the kitchen and rolled up my sleeves. The turkey wasn't going to cook itself. The oven felt like a furnace on my face, the heat mixing with my frustration into a kind of steam. As the gravy simmered and the pie crust started to brown, I felt my head spin. I took a seat for a quick breather. Linda stumbled upon me as if I'd planned it, her face twisting into a scowl. "What's this? Just sitting around while there's work to be done?" Before I could gather my wits to answer, Jack appeared behind her, his tone sharp. "Yeah, Alice, what's the deal? We got a timetable here." "I just needed a second," I said, the room tilting a little. "I'm not feeling too." "Oh, save it." Linda cut me off. "This family needs team players, not weaklings. If you can't handle it, maybe you shouldn't be here." Jack didn't say a word in my defense, just stood there nodding like a puppet. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I wouldn't let them see. "I'm not weak," I shot back, pushing up from the chair. "And I don't need this crap, not from you or anyone." Jack's face grew hard. "Watch it, Alice, or you'll be out of here so fast." He let the threat hang between us, heavy as the smell of roasting meat. I bit back a sob, threw on the apron, and turned back to the stove. They left, satisfied that I'd been put in my place. But later that night, after the plates were licked clean and the presents opened, after the laughter and the carols had quieted down, I lay in bed, the silent tears finally falling. They thought I was the weak one, but it was them, all of them. Weak for not helping, weak for not seeing, weak for not caring. Christmas dinner was set up like some kind of fancy spread you'd see in a magazine, except there was one thing off: my seat. It was away from the main table, like I had some sort of disease. I could hear them all, the clinking glasses and the loud laughs from where I was put. I sat there for a moment, staring at the untouched plate. A dry turkey slice stared back at me, the cranberry sauce bleeding into the stuffing like a bad joke. That's when I knew I was done. Finished playing pretend. Charlie was upstairs, asleep in one of the guest rooms. No way was I going to have my kid grow up thinking this nonsense was normal. I stood up, my chair screeching against the floor, louder than I expected. I didn't care. I went upstairs, packed the bags I'd been living out of for what felt like forever, zipped up Charlie's little backpack with his favorite toy and the picture book we read every night. Downstairs, the laughter ticked up a notch. They didn't even see me hauling our lives out of there in 2 trips. The walk to the train station was brutal, the cold cutting through my coat. But each step tugged a little something off my shoulders, a weight I didn't want to carry. At the station, it was empty, the kind of quiet you only get when everyone's at home. I sat there on the bench, Charlie bundled up beside me. "No more of that for us, Charlie," I whispered to him, hoping he was dreaming of something nice, something simple. "Just you and me now." The train rolled in, a lonely hunk of metal that blew hot air out the sides. I picked up Charlie, still asleep, and stepped inside the warmth. The clang of the closing door marked the end of an era as I lugged my bag out of what used to be home. The small bundle that was my baby dozed quietly in my arms, blissfully unaware of the turmoil surrounding us. It was just the two of us now, heading into the great unknown. I remember stuffing onesies and diapers haphazardly into the bag. There were no pictures taken off the walls. No second looks. Just the essentials for him and a few clothes for me. Every grab, every zip, felt like a tiny rebellion. Pulling into my parents' driveway was like stepping into a world paused at the brink of joy. They rushed out, my mom's arms wide, my dad's face split with a grin beneath his old, faded cap. "Alice, baby, come in. It's freezing out here." Mom smothered us in one of her bear hugs, the kind that could squeeze the sorrow straight out of your soul, while Dad took care of the bag and the base for the baby carrier. The warmth of the house hit me like a mug of hot cocoa. They had the Christmas tree twinkling, the lights blinking in a slow, sleepy pattern. We settled into the living room, and before I knew it, my mom had a steaming plate of food in front of me and a stocking filled with baby rattles and teething rings. It felt unreal. Laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the thick silence I'd escaped. The baby stirred in arms, and I kissed him, promising silently that it was going to be different. We were just about to toast, the clink of our glasses ready to sing, when my phone rang, jarring against the melodies of Jingle Bells. I checked the caller ID, Jack. "Hello? Alice, where the hell are you?" It was Jack, his voice a cocktail of anger and confusion. "At my parents'. Where else would I be?" I said, not missing a beat. There was a pause, and then, "You need to come back. This isn't your home anymore." I snorted, the laughter bubbling up from deep within, genuine and loud. "You're joking, right? I'm done with being treated like I'm invisible until you need something. Don't be dramatic. Just get back here. Everyone's asking about you, the dishes are piling up, I cut him off. "Look, listen carefully because I'm only going to say this once. I'm filing for divorce. Got it? I'm not your unpaid maid, Jack, never was. I don't know what made you think I was." The other end of the phone was silent. Then, the dial tone buzzed in my ear. He'd hung up. Mom was looking at me, eyes wide. I hung up the phone and met her gaze straight on. "I should have done that years ago," I said. "You're staying here tonight," Mom said, solid and sure, the way she'd said things when I was a kid and the world was too big and scary. "Yeah," I agreed, feeling the truth in her words. "Yeah, I am." Charlie's laughter filtered through from the other room. "Let's go celebrate Christmas," I said with a trembling smile. And with the click of the phone, I sealed the decision in the pocket of my jeans, and stepped back into the warmth of the living room where the promise of a peaceful night hung gently in the air, a stark contrast to the storm I had just weathered. Waking up to the same old ceiling crack had become kind of a comfort. The kitchen was already buzzing when I came down. Mom was at the stove, and Dad was half buried in newspaper at the table. Charlie was making a go at a slice of toast, more crumbs decorating his lap than making it into his mouth. "Morning," I mumbled, grabbing the pot to pour myself some coffee. Before I got the chance to take a sip, the phone was blaring its old ring from the wall. Dad's eyes met mine. With a hint of a smirk, I answered it, knew who it was before I even said hello. "Alice, darling, I need you to come back." Jack's voice came through, half pleading, half like he was ordering a pizza. "A man needs his wife. I need you to take care of things here." I almost choked on air, the laugh came out so hard. "Jack, honey, you lost the right to need anything from me." But nothing, Jack. I'll send over the divorce papers by the end of the week. You can take care of yourself, or find someone else to boss around. Have a nice life. And with that, I hung up. Mom was staring at me, one eyebrow raised. "Everything all right?" she asked, a knowing look on her face. "Couldn't be better," I said, finally taking that sip of coffee. It was bitter, strong, and hot. Just how I needed it. As weeks turned into months, that new chapter in life I'd opened became less about what I'd left behind and more about what was ahead. Divorce papers were signed, delivered, and done with. My bank account got a little heavier with the first round of alimony checks, child support Jack called it, but let's be real, it was guilt money. Either way, it was for Charlie, and that's all that mattered. The job hunt wasn't easy, wasn't hard either. Just a truckload of maybes and a handful of not. One day, sitting at the kitchen table with the want ads, I couldn't help but wonder if begging for jobs was just begging to go back to a life like the one I had with Jack. No, that wasn't for me, not anymore. "Why the long face?" Dad asked, scrunching up his own as he looked over at me from his chair. "Just thinking about work, or the lack of it." "You'll find something," he said. "You got more backbone than half the blokes at the factory. They should be begging you to work, not t'other way round." That night, with Charlie snoozing away in his crib, I lay awake a little longer than usual, the house quiet except for the distant sound of Mom and Dad talking softly downstairs. Maybe it wasn't the new start I'd imagined, with a new place of my own and a sparkling career. But it was solid ground under my feet. It was my family, my boy, and a future that was mine to shape. No more of Jack's dark clouds on my horizon, no more dancing to someone else's tune. Hi, I'm Marie. Mom and wife full-time, that's me. Paul, that's my husband, works the trading gig, and let's just say he's married to his job just as much as he is to me. Used to scribble down thoughts on books, reading between and beyond the lines, but these days I'm more about reading bedtime stories to our boy, Jack. Life threw some curveballs early on, lost my parents when I still needed them. That was rough. Then along came Paul, with a family in tow. His folks were the real deal, good people, you know. Took me in, no questions. Made me feel like I finally belonged somewhere again. Been with Paul for years now, since those college days when love seemed to be enough to fill any void. We settled into a rhythm, he at work and me taking care of everything else. But man, did that rhythm skip and stumble when Jack came into the picture. Paul changed, or maybe this was always him, just waiting for a reason to surface. He'd come home on a Friday night with a few too many drinks in him, loose-lipped and surly. "You gotta start shedding that weight, Marie," he'd snipe after slipping off his tie. "You barely fit in those jeans anymore." I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt, but I told myself to brush it off, toughen up, maybe he'd cool down by morning. But mornings just brought hangovers and silence until the next round. The house became this place where I tiptoed, trying not to set Paul off. Jack, little trooper, he could feel it too, sticking close, watching his old man with wide, careful eyes. One particularly rough Friday, Paul came home and made a beeline for the fridge, crack open a cold one. I was on the floor with Jack, blocks scattered around. "Another day in paradise, huh?" Paul sneered, leaning against the counter. I forced a smile. Just the usual, you know, chasing after this little tornado. I ruffled Jack's hair, but my heart wasn't in it. Paul tossed his head back, downing half the bottle. "Maybe put some of that energy into a workout routine, eh?" I bit my tongue, counting to 10 in my head. "I'll look into it," was all I managed, shuffling Jack into his pile of toys, anything to escape the cutting edge in Paul's tone. But the weight wasn't just on my hips, it was on my chest, heavy, making it hard to breathe. I didn't know who I was in Paul's eyes anymore. I had finally shaken off those last stubborn pounds. It felt good, kind of. But Paul, well, he had a talent for finding flaws. My sweats and baggy tees were the new target. "Jesus, Marie, you dress like you're living at the gym. When was the last time you dressed up? Remember how you used to look?" There he was, leaning on the doorframe with that look that said everything his words didn't. I glanced down at my stretched out mom life tee and yoga pants. This is just practical, Paul. You want me all dolled up to do laundry and wrangle our son? One corner of his mouth curled up like he had just made a successful trade. I dunno, how about looking good for your husband? That used to matter. I sighed, rolling my eyes. Well, unless my husband starts taking meetings at the playground or the grocery store, I think I'll stick with practical. He shook his head, chuckling without humor. You used to care, Marie. His voice trailed off as he wandered back toward the living room, his disapproval hanging in the air like a bad smell. Then there was Jack, our boy, trying to navigate the shaky terrain between us. I was teaching him please and thank you, thinking manners mattered. Paul caught a bit of our lesson one afternoon and scoffed. Look at you, teaching him to be Mr. Manners. You want him to get trampled on? Manners are important, Paul. It's about respect, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Respect is earned, not politeness policed, he shot back. He needs to toughen up, not be some yes, please pushover. Then the whole freeloader thing started. One night, Paul came home, tie askew, looking like he had won and lost the same fight. Nice day? He asked, sarcasm heavy as he glanced around what I'd come to see as our minefield of a home. I put down Jack's toy and braced for what was coming. Just the same, dealing with tantrums and spills. How was work? Paul's laugh was short and sharp. Work? Oh, it was just dandy, supporting a parasite. My cheeks burned. Excuse me? My voice was a little too loud. Jack's eyes flitted from me to Paul, sensing the shift. A parasite, Marie. I work, you play house, he said, each word pointed and heavy. That's the thanks I get? I am raising our child, Paul. Your child. That's work. That's vital, I said, my voice rising now, too. Jack started fussing then, picking up on the tension. I swept him up into my arms, trying to shield him from the fallout. Paul had a knack for knowing when he'd pushed too far, and his next words were more measured. Marie, I go out there and deal with sharks all day. Come home, and what? I don't know, something different. I can't be your one-man show, Paul, I said softly, trying to defuse the bomb that our marriage had become. I'm here, juggling a million things for us, for Jack. We looked at each other then, really looked, and I wondered if he saw the plea in my eyes. The help me, back me up, be with me that I felt screaming inside. But he turned away, the finality of his silence telling me that no, he didn't see. He didn't want to. One day, the disrespect boiled over. Jack scrunched up his little face and called me a name, a real zinger. He got it from Paul. You're just a lazy bum, he had hurled at me, his tiny voice bitter and angry. I felt like I'd been slapped. What? Jack, no, you can't say that. I stumbled, shocked. He folded his arms, stubborn as his dad. Dad says it, so can I. That was the last straw. When Paul got home, I was waiting, steaming like a forgotten kettle. You know what your son called me today? I laid into him without waiting for an answer. Paul dropped his keys on the counter and chuckled, clearly not seeing the line had been crossed. What did he say? The truth? He tossed his words over his shoulder as he walked to the fridge, his casualness like acid on my skin. Is that funny to you? I was shouting now, my usual restraint snapped tight as a dry twig. Your son is calling me names. Paul leaned against the kitchen counter, beer in hand, a smirk blooming on his face. Oh, come on, Marie. Kid's gotta learn to stand his ground. I was staring at him, hands balled into fists. By disrespecting his mother? He shrugged, a lazy lift of his shoulders that sent me teetering on the edge. You're too soft on him. Look, he's getting some spine. Spine? My voice shot up another octave. He's learning to be just like you. Paul grinned and ruffled Jack's hair. Ain't that right, champ? I turned to Jack, who was looking at us with eyes that were too old for his face. Jack, listen to me. What you said to me this morning was wrong. You can't talk to people like that. Jack's chin jutted out, defiant and stubborn. But Dad. I don't care what Dad says, you listen to your mom. I cut him off, my heart thudding like a drum. I was desperate for him not to follow in Paul's footsteps. But Paul wasn't letting it go. The boy's gotta learn to speak up. World's not gonna hand him anything. You keep coddling him, he'll end up. I get it, alright? I get it. I cut him off, feeling the weight of his words like a physical thing on my chest. But there's a line. You don't get it, do you? Paul threw up his hands, that ugly smirk still there. Whatever, Marie. You make mountains out of molehills. I turned from him, that burning in my chest now a churning mess. This is not how I want our son to grow up. This disrespect ends now, it ends here. Paul just took a swig of his beer, and I knew, right then, my words were just bouncing off him. I looked at Jack, really looked at him. You apologize to me, now, I said, the power in my voice surprising even me. Jack's eyes darted between me and Paul, but he knew that tone. Sorry, Mom. The word was small, almost lost in the kitchen, but it was there and it was a start. I moved closer to Jack, knelt down so I was eye level with him. Thank you. We treat each other with respect in this house, you got it? Paul snorted behind me, but I ignored him. Jack nodded, a hint of my boy peeking through that new sullen shadow he wore. It was a crack in the wall Paul was building around him, a crack, but also a starting point. I stood up, squared my shoulders. We're going to fix this, Jack. No more name-calling, no more disrespect. We're better than that. I took Jack's hand, and we left the room, leaving Paul and his smugness behind us. I stood there on the sidewalk, my phone shaking in my hand. It was one of those moments where your gut ties up in knots. There, across the street, Paul was laughing it up with some woman. Blonde, curvy, and looking at my husband like he was the last piece of chocolate in the box. My thumb pressed record before I even decided to. The walk home felt a million miles long. A part of me hoped it was a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew. Back in our kitchen, I threw my keys on the counter. Paul was sitting there with a beer, like he always did, but today the sight of him made me sick. Without a word, I tossed my phone on the table in front of him, the video playing. Care to explain? Paul looked at the screen, his eyes going hard when he saw what was on it. He muted it, placed it calmly on the counter, and then looked straight at me. Yeah, she's beautiful, he said, his voice dripping venom. You used to be like that. I felt the slap of his words, my cheeks flaming with anger, my body tense. So, that's it, huh? You parade around town with some woman while I'm at home? Paul stood up, his chair scraping back against the tile. He was too close now, his voice low and mean. What, you stalking me now, Marie? Can't handle the fact that maybe there's more out there than what's inside these walls? I was reeling, feeling the pieces click together. Cut the crap, Paul. You're cheating. He didn't even flinch. You want to know why, he said, his chest puffing up. Because around her, I'm somebody. Not just the guy who pays the bills or the bad guy 'cause he ain't Mr. Rogers. So that's it? I edged back, feeling the counter dig into my hips. Your family's not enough for you? Paul snorted and grabbed his beer again. It stopped being enough a long time ago. Maybe if you'd have kept up with yourself, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere. The bile rattled in my throat. I'm not the one who promised till death do us part. His laugh was short and punched the air. Those are just words, Marie. They stopped meaning anything to you a long time ago. I should have been crying, but the tears wouldn't come. I was just empty and angry. I gave you everything, Paul. I gave you a son, I made a home for us. And this is how you repay me? He took a long drink, then leaned back against the counter. You gave me a home? Looks like a prison to me. Same old, every damn day. You think that's a life? We made vows, Paul. I shouted, my voice cracking. Yeah, and you broke them every day with your sweatpants and constant nagging. His face twisted into something ugly, something monstrous. That was the last thing he said before I walked out, my heart numb, anger seeping into every corner of my being. I was on edge the whole ride over to Paul's folks' place. It was gonna be nasty, but I had to lay it out for them. They needed to know who their son really was. His mom answered the door, with a happy smile. Marie, what brings you here at this hour? I just barreled past her. I gotta show you both something. Once his dad came in, I played them the video straight up. His mom gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth. His dad, red-faced and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, he barked at me, Paul's gotta stop this nonsense now. And like that, all hell broke loose. That night back at our place, Paul kicked off as soon as I walked in. You had to drag my parents into this, didn't ya? His voice was loaded, ready to fire. Yeah, well someone's got to. I shot back, my nerves steel. He was a storm brewing. With a step towards me, his hand raised, but he didn't get far. You're bad. Jack's voice cut through, strong and braver than any of us. Paul stopped stone cold. Paul's hand dropped, and his mask slipped a second, shock in his eyes. But then he hardened up again, cold as steel. I want you out, he said, spitting the words like they were sour. Take the kid and go. So we went. With Jack's hand in mine, I didn't look back. Bags thrown in the back of the car, we headed for the city, miles of road unwinding like my thoughts. The luxury house was something else, my unexpected inheritance. 2 stories, white columns, and a porch you could throw a party on, all waiting in another city, away from everything that had gone wrong. None of my folks, not even a whisker of Paul or his clan, had ever set eyes on it. When we pulled up to this grand house, Jack's face pressed to the window, eyes as wide as the moon. Is this a castle? His voice was a whisper, almost lost in the vastness of it all. Something like that, I said, a laugh escaping me for the first time in. I couldn't even remember. We stepped into that house, our new beginning. It was silent, save for the echo of our footsteps on the marble floors, bouncing off the high ceilings crowned with crystal chandeliers. The furniture was swanky, left behind by folks I wish had lasted a lifetime longer. I plopped down on a couch soft as clouds, and finally, Jack's laughter filled the rooms. The sound of it was more luxurious than anything else in this place. We explored room after room, Jack running ahead like he was leading a parade. Each new door opened to a room grander than the last. I call the biggest one, he declared, claiming a bedroom that overlooked a garden already blooming with the promise of spring. Laying him down to bed that night, the day finally caught up with me. My eyes burned with the tiredness of it all, but looking around at the high ceilings, the gold trimming catching moonlight, I knew we were worlds away from where we started. Sitting there, in the quiet of a room too nice for today's shadows, I whispered into the darkness, "We made it, kiddo." Life in the big house slowly shed the shadows of the past. Jack's giggles filled the halls more than the echoes of old fears. Most days, it felt like we had always been there, just the two of us, in our new safe haven. The house, with its silent strength, was keeping the world at bay, until the day Paul showed up, uninvited and unwelcome. He was at the door in a storm of anger. I opened it and there he was, looking like trouble had followed him around. "You can't just disappear with my son, Marie." I leaned against the door frame, unfazed. "He's my son too. And I didn't disappear. I moved on." Paul's scowl deepened. He glanced around, taking in the opulence of the place with wide, disbelieving eyes. "How can you afford this? I know you don't make this kind of dough." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. Well, turns out I had a little left over each month. Who knew? He raised an eyebrow, a sly accusation in his gaze. "And I'm struggling to cover rent for that old place by myself. It's damn near impossible now that they jacked up the price." I shook my head. He always was good at playing the martyr. That's not my problem anymore, Paul. I've been using my own savings to cover the gap in the rent for years. Savings that, thank God, I don't need to bleed dry for that house anymore. The greed in his eyes flared up like wildfire. What, and you're living here in luxury while I... Stop right there, I cut in. This isn't your concern. This, I motioned to the grand house behind me, is mine. Mine and Jack's. Paul took a step forward, but I didn't back down. Look, I came here to fix things. I'm saying I forgive you for all this, sneaking around. His audacity almost knocked the wind out of me, but I had a little surprise that would put the brakes on his charade. From behind the door, I pulled out the divorce papers and slapped them into his chest. And here's what I'm saying. We're done. He looked as if I'd slapped him with a physical hand, his face twisting through confusion, rage, and then settling on calculating desperation. You can't do this. What about Jack? I stood taller, my resolve like iron. I'm doing it for Jack. He doesn't need this chaos you bring. Sign the papers, Paul. It's over. He glanced from the papers to me, then back again, his posture deflating slightly. You'll regret this. You can't make it alone. That's where you're wrong. I smiled, not from humor but from a deep-seated confidence. I'm already making it, and without you, we're doing more than just fine. We're thriving. With a shake of his head, Paul looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. Instead, he turned on his heel and strode away, clutching the papers like they were a snake that could bite. Once he was gone, the house seemed to exhale with me. I closed the door gently, turning back to the life I had fought so hard for. Life had a way of tossing stuff at you, hard and fast. It was Thursday, the kind of day that should have been easy, but it wasn't. We shirked dinner for a bit, setting up ramps out of old books and watching the Lego car stupidly do flips and land upside down. Jack's laugh was infectious, the sort that wiped clean the worry lines off my face. His enthusiasm was a reminder that amid all the crap, there was still good, simple, unadulterated good. Then it came, a banging on the door that made my stomach drop and my face lose all its motherly warmth. Paul had a knack for bad timing and worse entrances. I pulled the door open and there he was, looking like he'd just come from a bar fight or lost a bet. Paul, what's up? He scowled, that usual look he gets when he thinks the world owes him. So, this the high life? You playing house with my Jack while I'm scraping pennies just to get by? Jack peeked from behind me, a knight in Lego armor. Hey, screw off, Paul. Don't talk to my mom like that. Paul's face turned a nice shade of tomato. The hell? You let him talk like that? I stood there, hands on hips. He's expressing himself. Something I should have done with you a long time ago. Jack came out from behind me, all fierce. Yeah, get lost. My mom, my rules. Paul's anger was something else, a storm that had nowhere to go. You think you're smart, huh? Talking to your old man like that. Jack squared his shoulders, a small David to Paul's Goliath. Don't gotta think. I know it. Mom knows it. Paul opened his mouth, but nothing came out. There was Jack, staring him down, waiting. This was no place for Paul anymore, no place for his bluster and noise. After a tense moment, Paul shook his head, muttered something under his breath and stormed off the porch. Jack turned to me with this look, the kind of look that said, "We got this." I nodded, all the agreement he needed. We went back to boiling pasta and racing Lego cars. That's how we do it, simple, nothing fancy. We just keep on. I was gabbing on the phone with Miss Dottie, Paul's mom, who was more my family than is now. Honey, you just holler if there's anything you need, 'kay? Her voice was always a warm blanket over the line. We're all good, Miss Dottie. Really, couldn't be better, I assured her, twisting the cord around my finger. She hummed a pleased note. Just makes my heart full to hear that. Keep on keeping on, you hear? Frank, her husband, yelled from somewhere behind her. Tell her that any time she wants to send over some of that lemon meringue, we won't complain. A genuine laugh burst out of me. Expect a pie on your doorstep soon, Frank. Exchanging a few more pleasantries, we hung up. I shook my head. If someone had told me last year I'd be mining gold from the wreckage of my married life, I would have laughed in their face. Jack pulled on my sleeve, waving his drawing like a 5-star general. Look, Mom. This is our house. I looked down. His scribbles had heart. A big square house and 2 stick figures, a little one and a tall one, with sloppy grins and a lopsided sun shining down. The swing I'd put up for him stood out in green and brown strokes. That's us, right? A dumb question, really, but it made him nod with pride. And I'm gonna sell my art, make us rich. There was serious conviction behind his toothy smile. If you do, you're buying me that fancy coffee I've been eyeing? I nudged him with a wink. He nodded, his expression all business. Only the best for my mom. And just like that, the knot in my chest loosened a bit more. Sundays were like that, full of little miracles. The thing was, life had done a real number on us, but it was looking up. Paul got slammed by the door he let hit him on his way out. The fancy house he rented to impress his mistress? Turned out to be a couple of sizes too big for his wallet. Now he was cooped up in a tiny apartment, the kind of place his pride wouldn't have let him consider a year ago. And the mistress? She hightailed it the minute his pockets turned up empty and his promises hollow. But that was a tale for some other time. Right now was about Jack and me, and the park we were marching to, hand in hand. We stepped out, and the door clicked shut, a soft full stop to one chapter before immediately kicking off the next. Jack tugged me towards the park, his excitement bubbling over. I didn't glance back at our home, no need. Ahead was everything that mattered, me and my boy, parts of a world that kept on spinning, even when you felt like you'd fallen off. Look, I'm Jess. I crunch numbers for a living, and I guess I'm doing all right for myself. I've got this kid, Alex, a real bright spark, keeps asking questions about everything under the sun. Then there's my other half, Mike. He runs the show at some warehouse, not the career of his dreams, but it pays some of the bills. And it's just enough for Mike, he's not the type to chase more. Our life's what you'd call run-of-the-mill. We wake up, go about our jobs, come back, and do the family thing. Not exciting, but steady. Problem is, the steady's turned shaky lately. Mike, he's been rolling in late from work, looks like he's been through the ringer every time. Bags under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, and his mood stinks. Tried to get him to chat about it, crack that shell of his. But that man's locked up tighter than a bank vault. Mike, what's eating you? I asked him just last night. You're acting all sorts of strange these hours. He just glared at me, all red-eyed and frazzled. It's nothing, Jess. Work's a pain in the neck, that's all. Just lay off, okay? I know when to back off, but it's like a splinter in my mind, you know? He used to be straight with me, and now it's like I'm talking to a brick wall. You're not touching your dinner, Mike. What's up? I tried to nudge him at supper. Nothing fancy, just some meat and potatoes. But he barely poked at it. I said drop it, Jess. I ain't in the mood to chat about my day, he snapped back, pushing the plate away, and that end of discussion looked plastered on his face. Alex piped up from across the table, fork halfway to his mouth. Dad, you gonna come to my game this weekend? You said you'd try. Mike just ruffled Alex's hair, his attempt at a smile more like a wince. We'll see, champ. Your old man's got a lot on his plate right now. I watched them, father and son, an unsaid worry passing between them. That's my world right there, feeling like it might come apart at the seams. There's this static in the air every time Mike walks in late, a mix of sweat and something sour I can't place. He whispers about work stress, but there's a tug in my gut telling me it's more than that, a lot more. Mike's become like those puzzle pieces you find behind the couch, doesn't fit anywhere, doesn't make sense. And the more I push, the more he clams up. What gives? So there you have it. No sugarcoating, no dressing it up. Just our plain Jane life hitting a bit of a rough patch. I've got a kid to raise and bills to pay, and now a husband who's acting like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. Only thing is, he won't let me carry a piece of that burden. I'm out here trying to figure it out without letting on to Alex that there's trouble brewing. Gone. Just like that, Mike's car was history. Came home on foot, a look on his face I had trouble reading. Jess, he said, his voice jittery, the car's gone. Stolen. So, call the cops, Mike. My brother can sniff this out. Easy, I said. But he was shaking his head before I even finished the sentence. No way, I've got it covered, he insisted, but he wouldn't look me in the eyes when he said it. The whole thing smelled fishy. He'd never had good luck with cars, but stolen? That was a new one. Got it covered how? You got a private detective in your pocket or something? I teased, trying to lighten the mood, but Mike wasn't having any of it. Just back off, Jess. I said I'll handle it. His words came out harsh, and he walked off to the shower, leaving me standing there with a kitchen full of whys and what-ifs. His dad's car became his new wheels. You should have seen it, a battered thing that coughed more than it roared. Borrowing it for a while, he said, each word heavy like stones. We sat down at the kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg, and I watched Alex, who looked more and more like his father every day, swinging his feet as he ate his cereal. He was itching to ask about the car, you could tell, but one look from me kept it shut tight in his mouth. Over the rattle of the morning news and Alex's spoon clinking, I decided to push one more time. We should report it, Mike. Insurance will eat us alive if we don't, I said, real casual. Mike slammed his mug on the table, coffee splashing out. Jess, for the last time, drop it. It's not your problem. Alex's feet stopped swinging, and that's when you know it's real bad, when a kid goes quiet all sudden like. The rest of the day was just nuts and bolts. Mike left in his dad's clunker, and I dropped Alex off at school, my head a mess with thoughts screaming in all directions. By the time I clocked into work, I had settled on one thing: I was going to find out what was going on, with or without Mike. Lunch break, my phone buzzed, it was my brother. Jess, you okay? Heard about Mike's car. Need me to take a look? He offered, always the protector, even though we're adults now. I wanted to say yes, tell him everything, but I hesitated. What if Mike was in deeper than just a stolen car? I'll let you know, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, like it was nothing, just a car gone AWOL, not my world tipping sideways. By the time I got home, the place was silent, no sign of Mike or his troubles. Only Alex at the table, scribbling away at his homework, the TV murmuring in the background. So, here we go again, another chapter in the life of Jess. A missing car, a husband with secrets, and a boatload of unanswered questions. Tomorrow's another day, but one thing's for sure, I can't just sit on my hands. I'm finding out what's going on, one way or another. Mike's not the only one good at keeping things tight under wraps. Ever seen someone there, but not there? That's Mike. Misses dinner, doesn't kiss Alex goodnight, turns invisible come bedtime. Acts like he's on another planet. The weekend rolled around, Alex ready for those bike rides they used to nail every Saturday morning. He's there, helmet on, excitement buzzing off him like bees on a hive. And nothing, Mike's locked away in the bedroom acting like he's turned to smoke. Mike, come on. The kid's waiting. You promised. I yelled through the door, my hand gripping the knob so tight my knuckles got white. I'm not up for it, Jess. Just take him, will you? His voice a muffled surrender from behind the wood. Alex's face fell a mile. I shrugged, combed his hair back with my fingers. Let's go, champ, just you and me this time. We hit the pavement, me pedaling behind him, watching those little legs pump like pistons. He's getting good, too good. Should have been his dad watching. After, over cold sandwiches, I lay it out for his folks. The stolen car, the late nights, the silence heavy as lead. They're good folks, made me feel like family since day one. They listened, hands clasped, a wrinkle of worry etched between shared glances. Jess, kids his age, his mom started, always the forgiving type. They get like this. You ride it out. Midlife thing or not, he's riding out alone. I shot back, not buying any of this phase talk. He's ditching his son, for God's sake. His dad chimed in, cutting the air with that old sense of authority he can't shake off. Give the man space, Jess. We didn't raise him to bail on family. Space? Feels like he's halfway to the moon right now. I fired off, done with sugarcoating bitter pills. They didn't have the answers, none of us did. So, I sat there, the kitchen clock ticking away your standard awkward silence. They love him, but they're clutching at straws, just like me. Back home, I find Mike on the couch blanketed in shadows, the room dark except for the flicker of some late-night show. Alex is long asleep, dreams and all. We need to talk, Mike. Now, I said, my voice steady as a drumbeat, every word a decision. He peels himself off the couch, tired or defeated, it's hard to tell. What is it, Jess? Mike huffs, like it's an effort just to stand. I'm not blind, something's gnawing at you. It's eating us up, all of us. My words clipped out like bullets. Mike's eyes finally lift to meet mine, some spark in their fighting through the fog. Jess, it's a mess you don't need to be in. Oh, I'm in it, Mike. You made sure of that when you started sleepwalking through your life. I'd had it, my patience frayed to strands. He leans on the wall. For a sec, it looked like he'd slide to the floor. I can't, not yet. That voice, a whisper of its regular self. Okay, Mike, let's see how long you can keep up this act. I'm clawing for answers, and if Mike won't hand them over, I'll turn over every rock, every dark corner, until everything that's hidden starts spilling out into the light. For Alex, I'll do it. For us, I'll go the distance. The stillness of the night was shattered by the shrill ring of the phone. It was the sound that heralds news, seldom good. Mike's hand shot out to snatch it up, and the blood drained from his face as he listened to the voice on the other end. There were a few hushed, frantic words, and then silence. Heart problems, he said, voice shaking, looking at me with eyes full of terror. Dad's been taken to the hospital. Before I could even process the information, Mike was already dressed and darting for the door, his father's old car keys in hand. Wait! I'll come with you. I cried out, but he was gone. The door slammed behind him, and the sound echoed through the empty house like a grim reminder that I was now alone with my thoughts and the daunting tick-tock of the wall clock. Hours passed, each minute stretching longer than the last, anxiety my only companion. Doubt began to gnaw at me as I watched the moon trace its path across the sky. Against all instincts that screamed at me to stay put, I picked up the phone and dialed my mother-in-law. Is everything okay with Dad? I breathed into the phone when she picked up. There was a pause, a flicker of confusion in her voice. What are you talking about, dear? He's right here, watching the late show with me. The room spun. Mike, he told me there were heart problems, that Dad was taken to the hospital. Oh, honey, she said, her voice laced with worry and something else, something akin to disbelief. There's no hospital. There's no heart issues. Mike never said a word to us about going anywhere tonight. Bile rose in my throat. The betrayal stung like a slap in the face. My husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner in all things life threw at us, had lied straight to my face. Mike left in a panic. Said it was urgent, I managed to say, my own voice sounding distant and foreign. If he's not with you, then where? We'll figure this out. She cut in, her tone attempting reassurance that couldn't reach me. You just stay there with Alex. We'll sort it all out. After I hung up, the silence of the house screamed louder than the ring of the phone ever did. The trust we had, the foundation we built our family on, felt like it had crumbled in an instant. Where was he, and why lie? The questions blazed in my mind, turning over and over without answers. The phone felt heavy in my hand as Ron's voice finally pierced through the static uncertainty. Jess? What's this late call about? Taking a breath to steady myself, I dove in. Ron, Mike mentioned something about you, about a hospital. Is everything all right? Silence enveloped the line for a brief moment before Ron replied. Hospital? No, nothing like that. I'm fine, Jess. Why would Mike say that? A knot tightened in my gut, and I knew something wasn't right. He said you had heart trouble. He took your car. I'm worried, Ron. All right, I can track where my car's gone off to, he offered after a pause. Give me a moment. We hung up, and the ensuing wait filled the room like a thick fog. Alex's sleepy voice broke the silence with a question. Is Grandpa okay? I smiled reassuringly. We'll know soon. True to his word, half an hour later, Ron's voice relayed through the phone. The car's at the city hospital. A silent alarm went off in my head. Thanks, Ron. We're going to check on this, I said, the last words shadowed by a chilling premonition. Grabbing our coats, I quickly dressed Alex. We shared no words on the matter, the gravity of our mission spoke loud enough. Together, we left the warmth of our home for the cool ambiguity of the night. The city's roads lay mostly empty as we made our way to the hospital, the silence in the car a stark contrast to the clamor of thoughts ricocheting in my mind. When we arrived in the parking lot, I found Ron's car abandoned under the eerie glow of streetlights. Do we go inside, Mommy? Alex inquired, his innocence a striking contrast to the complexity of our situation. I took a deep breath, weighing the options. My instinct urged me to surge forward, to confront the mystery head-on, but caution whispered its words of prudence. The pieces didn't add up, and whatever awaited inside might be something I needed to face without Alex by my side. We'll approach this together, but carefully, Alex. We'll go in, but we have to be prepared for whatever we might find. He nodded, his small hand finding mine, a gesture of silent solidarity. I took Alex by the hand, making sure he stayed close. Remember, stay with me no matter what, I said to him as we walked towards the hospital entrance. The automatic doors slid open with a whoosh, and the sterile smell of the place hit my nose. You could never forget that hospital smell. We navigated through the corridors, my eyes scanning, looking for Mike. And then I saw him, just outside one of the rooms. He wasn't alone. I saw the woman first. Her arms cradling a newborn, looking tired and familiar. Mike looked like he had seen a ghost, his face drained of color the moment our eyes met. What the hell, Mike? I said, louder than I meant to. The woman stepped back, looking between us, holding the baby closer to her chest. Who's she? She asked, her voice blunt. Mike's eyes were glued to my face, his mouth opening and closing with no sound. Jess, this is not what it looks like, he finally stammered out. Really? 'Cause it looks pretty bad from where I'm standing, I shot back. The woman piped up again. He sold his car. For us. To pay the bills here. Mike tried to interrupt, but I put my hand up. I'm not talking to you right now. Turning to the woman, I asked. How long has this been going on? A while, she said flatly, bouncing the baby slightly. And the kid. I couldn't even finish the sentence. Yeah, he's Mike's, she confirmed, looking me right in the eye. I felt like I got punched in the gut. My head was spinning, and I could barely register Alex's hand squeezing mine. Mommy? Is the baby sick? Alex's small voice brought me back to reality. No, honey, the baby's fine, I said automatically, still trying to wrap my head around the mess. Mike finally found his voice. Jess, please, let's talk about this. Talk? I almost laughed, but it came out like a bark. You got a whole secret life here, and you want to talk? You should have talked before it got to this. Mike looked down, and I could see he was shaken, but right now I didn't care. Jess, I can explain. Save it, Mike. We're done here, I said, cutting him off. I grabbed Alex's hand and turned to leave. Mike reached out, trying to stop me, but I snapped at him. Don't you touch me. Walking away, I could still hear him calling after me, but his words were just noise. Alex looked up at me with questions in his eyes, but I wasn't ready to answer them yet. We got to the car, and I strapped Alex into his seat, taking a moment to breathe. I could feel tears pricking my eyes, but I held them back. As we drove away from the hospital, away from the unwelcome surprise, I didn't know what was going to happen. But right then, I knew I had to be strong, for Alex. We barely got home when I saw Ron and Linda's car screech into the driveway. They came out fast, walking towards me like they meant business. Linda had that look, the one that meant trouble, big trouble. Jess, what's going on? Ron was the first to speak. His eyes were darting around, looking for Mike. It's done, Ron. We're done. I'm filing for divorce. The fairy tale's over, I said, not mincing my words. Linda stepped forward. What the hell did that boy do now? The anger in her voice hit the air like a slap. I barely had time to tell them everything. Mike's car pulled in, right on cue. He got out, slow, like he was walking to his own funeral. What the hell, Mike? Ron was on him like a hawk. You've got that girl, with a baby. A baby, Mike. Mike's head hung low, his voice was barely a whisper. Dad, I'm sorry. I messed up. Messed up? You call this a mess up? Linda was almost screeching now. The woman from the hospital stepped out of Mike's car, baby in her arms, and everything just stopped for a second. The look on Ron and Linda's faces, it was like they saw a ghost. Who's she? Linda's voice was ice cold now. Mike looked like he was fighting back tears. She's someone I'd been seeing. Seeing? While you have a family? Ron's voice boomed. Linda chimed in, and you got her pregnant while you're married to our daughter-in-law? And we find out at a hospital? The woman stood there, silent, holding the baby closer when Linda's eyes shot daggers at her. This ain't sliding by, Mike. No way in hell, I snapped. Mike turned to me, desperation in his voice. Jess, please. Save it, I cut him off. Linda stepped forward. You're going to support this child. You're not walking away from this. But believe me, you're gonna pay for breaking our daughter-in-law's heart. Ron nodded, and we'll be right there with her, every step of the way. Mike just stood there, defeat written all over him. I'll do whatever it takes. You bet you will, Ron said, his anger settling into a grim resolve. I looked at all of them, my soon-to-be ex-husband, his mistress, his parents. My lawyer. Tomorrow. I want this settled. Fast. Ron and Linda gave me a nod. We've got your back, Linda said, and the look in her eye told me she meant every word. I turned on my heel, Alex's hand in mine, and walked back into our now broken home. Mike's voice followed me, saying sorry over and over, but it was too late for sorry. Life had sure done a number on us. But there I sat, on the porch swing, Alex curled up next to me, a math book opened on his lap. The sun was setting, the sky a mix of pink and gold, like a watercolor gone wild. How's homework going, kiddo? I asked, not ready to dive back into the adult world just yet. Alex shrugged. Okay, I guess. The numbers keep doing a dance though. Yeah, they do that sometimes. I chuckled, ruffling his hair. They'll settle down if you stare at them long enough. We laughed, the easy sound of it taking the edge off the day. Then the phone buzzed. I pulled it out of my pocket, a text from Linda. How are you holding up? It read. I smiled. Linda always had timing like a clockwork. Getting by. One piece at a time, I texted back. I looked out at the yard, thinking about how different life was now. Mike had taken a serious tumble from the life we once shared. His new place, a cramped apartment above a noisy bar, was a far cry from the house he'd left behind. He was pulling double shifts, trying to make ends meet, pay the alimony and whatever he owed to her. "Mom, when's Dad coming around?" Alex's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Haven't heard, buddy. But you know, we're doing pretty good, you and I answered. "Yeah, just us." He smiled, and there was something in that smile that told me the kid was going to be all right. Then the other phone rang, the landline. Old school. It jarred the quiet of the evening. Alex jumped up to grab it. "I got it, Mom." "Careful there, Speedy," I called after him. I heard his little feet pound the hallway. The sound of his laughter as he chatted with whoever was on the other end warmed the space. He was a resilient little man. I took a deep breath. "Mom, it's for you," he called out, his voice echoing. I picked up where he left off. "Hello? Jess, it's me." Mike's voice was low, almost guilty. "What can I do for you, Mike?" My voice was colder than I intended. Are you both okay?" His voice sounded like it carried the weight of the world. "We're managing, Mike. Alex is doing great." There was silence, a long one, then a defeated sigh. That's good to hear." "Mike, look, we're picking up the pieces here. You should be doing the same," I said, more firmly this time. "I am, Jess. Or at least, I'm trying." Another pause. He was always heavy with the pauses. "Goodbye, Mike." The click of the phone felt like the end of an era. It kinda was. I walked back onto the porch, the creak of the swing welcoming me back. Alex looked up, his eyes were curious. Life was indeed very different now. Just Alex and me, with Grandma and Grandpa popping in enough to keep us smothered in love and bad jokes. The house was quieter, but it was still full of us, our life, our laughter, our love. The days ahead would still have their challenges. Divorce papers don't wipe away the messiness of life, and co-parenting was a road we were still figuring out how to navigate. But that evening, as the sky turned from pink to a deep blue, a sense of peace settled over the house.